Did Anthropic just admit that MCP was a mistake?
So, no, they're really just advising organizations on how to be more efficient while still using the MCP. I don't think it's MCP versus CLI. I think it's MCP or CLI for whichever use case you're looking at.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Live Laugh Logs, and we have a little change today. Andre is no longer with us, but we have the amazing George Pickers with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, very well, thank you.
Amazing. Andre has made the move out to the US.
So it's a tactical substitution in.
Very sad, but
honorary substitution.
Honorary substitution. So today we have a really exciting topic, which I've been seeing people talking about a lot, and that is the big debate between MCP and CLI. So we've got some interesting stuff to get into, but as always, what have we been up to recently? Lewis, where have you been?
Where have I been? I've been to Amsterdam twice. It was so nice. I had to go twice. First, I was there for a Miro meetup, which was really cool. Got to speak to some developers out there. All about the CLI, so kind of half of this topic. So I'm going to be half useful today, and then I went back out there the week after for AWS with George.
With myself. Yeah, so I've also been to Amsterdam. Really exciting. Met lots of interesting prospects and customers about some of the interesting things that we're particularly doing in the AI space. And then also I've been traveling around the UK recently and meeting some more of our customers and really talking about ways that we can innovate, particularly in AI. It's a really hot topic at the moment.
Exciting. And I have been basically doing a tour of Germany, been to Munich, Hamburg, and I'm off to Berlin next week for...
What's been your favorite part so far?
Oh, I think we had some really nice food and wine, so that's been very enjoyable. But we're off to DevOpsCon in Berlin next week, so I'm looking forward to that. And yeah.
Fantastic.
Amazing.
So George, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us about what you do at Coralogix and why you're excited to be on the podcast today.
Yeah, sure. So my name is George Pickers. I head up the solution engineering department for EMEA and APAC here at Coralogix. I'm really excited to be here, really excited to share what I can bring in terms of my knowledge of the space, and particularly this topic is very pertinent at the moment. It's a really quickly evolving space, and so happy to be part of the conversation.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. And let's just start by defining what MCP is and what CLI is, and what are the key differences between these two?
Yeah, so MCP is really a standard protocol for interfacing between agents and other systems. And that might even be agents and other agents, right? So it's kind of a unified standard for that type of communication. CLI in the agentic sense is actually more giving a real binary tool to an agent that you may have to be able to use an alternative method to MCP, right? Actually interface with a system via native APIs. And they both have their strengths and weaknesses, right? So MCP being the standard really gives you a very rationalized and standardized way of that communication, but also it gives you other benefits like the centralization of authentication, right? Whereas when we're talking about using a binary on our local agents, that means that we're decentralizing authentication. We're having to distribute potentially keys at that point, which has security ramifications. But with CLIs, of course, we get the benefits of being able to do some other things which are maybe more token efficient, right? And we can talk about that maybe as we go through this discussion.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah, cool. So in terms of like use cases, where do you see the use cases for CLI versus MCP?
Sure. So it typically depends on the technology that you're leveraging, right? Yeah. So if you have maybe another SaaS platform that you want to integrate with your system, and that has an agentic experience within it, that's when we're going to typically use something like MCP. Because you want that standardized mechanism, you want that authentication protocol centralized as well. When we're talking about using maybe your own agents, like your coding agents, maybe Claude Code or Cursor, etc. That's when we're going to start using things like CLI, right? Giving the binary tool directly to those agents that can interface with your system.
Yeah. Do you think there's any increased risk in the MCP use case in terms of like giving agent access to like a third-party tool. Like we don't, if we don't monitor kind of what we're sharing in terms of data to that tool or what the agent is.
100%, yeah, there is. I mean, there's risks in both, right? Because you also maybe don't have as much control over where, the laptop is that's running that coding agent that's also exposed whatever information that you're exposing. But yeah, there are definitely risks with giving autonomous access to any form of data store. So you definitely need to think about how you're governing this, how you're securing it, and how you're tracking that usage as well.
No, exactly. Actually, one of the conversations I had in one of my Amsterdam trips, the first one, was that there was one particular company that had a lot of like PI data in their observability platform, and they were worried about giving like an agent access to that without visibility, and also being able to like connect to like third parties through MCP. Like, could it potentially get some PI data and tell, I don't know, Figma when they're making a design, when whatever it's connected to, with that. So that kind of observability piece is super important.
Yeah, for sure. So, George, it sounds like there's very real use cases for both situations, but we saw this blog post recently from Anthropic, and I kind of want to know, did Anthropic just admit that MCP was a mistake when they told everyone to now write code instead of calling tools?
So, no, is the simple answer. To elaborate on that, though, I think really what they're getting at is, this is an evolving space. And so the way that we adopt these tools and the way that we interface with these tools is going to evolve as well. And token economics has become such a big topic right now, right? Everyone's looking at how can we use these tools, but how can we use them efficiently? And the most pertinent thing that's come to light is that if you're using MCP, you're effectively pulling all those tools and chucking them into the context, which consumes tokens for every execution. So what they're suggesting now is a more efficient way of being able to interface with these tools is to use code locally, to download that context and save it locally and reference it locally. And that reduces your token count when you have multiple calls through MCP. And so they're really just advising organizations on how to be more efficient while still using the MCP.
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone's like on the same page here. My understanding of MCP is that there's almost like you're paying double the price. The agent has to load in all the context at the beginning and then also gets everything back and has to deal with all of that. Is that right?
To an extent, yes. So it is loading all the context at the beginning, and then it's pulling effectively the raw data output, right? And this is where some of the downfalls of MCP exist. And I think there's going to be further efficiencies built into this as we continue to see progress in this space. But this is why this code execution blog has come out, right? It's to fix that first problem. How do we make sure that we're not loading all of the tools through MCP and consuming tokens for every execution? I'd be really interested to see what we can do to also maybe have some server-side aggregations coming through MCP as well, which is what you can do with CLI.
Okay, so let's dive into that. Why is it that you can have server-side aggregations when using a CLI tool?
So typically with CLI tools, they're API based, right? So they allow us to do a few things. Firstly, on the server side, we can actually set up ways that we aggregate the data and the results that we're going to serve through those APIs to make sure that they're as efficient as possible. So then when they do get back to an agentic experience, they're very easily readable. Secondly, you can also incorporate other frameworks, right? So if we're talking about what we do, for example, we use TOON, right, which is token-orientated object notation.
That's a bit of a mouthful.
And that allows us to basically minify the JSON, turn it into something that's more like a CSV file, and it's much easier to read and consume, and also much easier, much lower on the token consumption in terms of how it's leveraged.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, actually. Like, we're so used to JSON, it's so ubiquitous, but now there's actually different ways of like putting all this data together.
Formatting the same data.
Formatting it, and actually makes such a big difference. I think it was like a 90% reduction in tokens, something around that.
So yes, it is to an extent. I think it depends on the types of calls you're making, right? So people will see typically somewhere between 40 to 90%. But yeah, if you're doing really large requests and pulling back huge JSON files, you're definitely going to be hitting up by that 90% range.
Wow.
Yeah, completely. I've seen the difference with our own CLI, for example, where we can export to JSON or to an agent, an agent form, which is like the difference in token output is mega. So great.
Nice. So it sounds like there's lots of use cases of CLI. It's pretty good. So is MCP just solving a problem that Bash solved in the 80s?
So not really.
Okay.
What Bash did in the 80s for technology is it gave humans an interface that was standardized to be able to interface with that technology, right? And MCP is sort of fixing a similar issue, but now for the agentic space. So giving agents a way to interact with technology in a unified standard. CLI is also trying to address that same challenge, but it's taking the more kind of Bash-centric approach, right? It's using a terminal, it's giving you those specific commands and arguments that you can use, and that can be more tailored towards specific technologies. So you're going to find more diversity, I guess, in what that does. It's also more restrained in what it can do, right? So you're going to be targeting really just agents that you run locally, rather than opening it up to a wide portfolio of technologies that want to intercommunicate.
Right. Okay.
So have you guys heard about the status update to MCP?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was a recent thing, right? That's made a big change to the architecture.
Yeah, completely.
For more context, this update to MCP means that instead of a session being sticky and having to go to the exact same instance of a server each time, a request, when it goes back and when an agent sends multiple requests back and forth, it could go to any server on the MCP server. So it's a lot easier to scale, as you say, easier for load balancing, etc.
Yeah.
And do you think does it fix MCP or does it make it easier to scale?
So it's really the latter, right? It's just helping with the way that we can actually scale MCP interfaces. So now we're not tied to, having a single path. But unfortunately, in terms of token consumption, you're going to find it's going to be almost exactly the same as what you've been seeing before.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah, there was a lot of hype around it, but it seems like there's still going to be those limitations.
Yeah, it's not going to help you with your token economics, but it does make you have much better availability, resiliency when you're talking about setting up MCP servers.
So the next thing we wanted to talk about is we're kind of been seeing this trend, like the headless trend, spearheaded by CLI tools. And we're doing this ourselves at Coralogix. Headless observability is now a thing, which is kind of spooky when you think about it, but it's fun. So George, tell us a little bit about headless observability and why using a CLI tool is really effective for this.
Yeah, so when we're talking about headless observability, we're really talking about taking the information that you get from an observability platform away from just being a user interface, right? So now actually making it available in a format that's available for business users in text, and making it available for developers within their IDEs, right? So really bringing that data to them rather than them having to go to the platform to capture it.
Yeah, completely. And, a part of me, as a former front-end engineer, when I first heard about it, I was just like, what's going on? No one loves the UI more than me. Why are you taking this away from me? But we've seen real benefits from this. Like I keep mentioning Amsterdam.
Okay, we get it, you love it.
Yeah, I know. I went to Amsterdam, by the way. City airport, it was lovely. When I went one of my Amsterdam trips, and in the dev meetup, one thing that I think really resonated with the audience was I did a bit of a demo where I had an application that was built by an agent, and I asked an agent to basically do a whole pull request, and I knew there was going to be errors in it, and the agent was able to, once it went into prod, the agent was able to kind of pull the logs down from Coralogix itself, and then see those error logs, and then suggest fixes for that itself whilst looking for that. And that's really powerful, because then in subsequent commands after, the agent wasn't making the same mistake that it did previously. So I think it's really cool for engineers to have, but it's also cool for agents as well.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
Yeah.
Enabling iterative improvement effectively within your code base. And also, it's allowing users to now actually build assets effectively within the tools that they're interfacing with. Typically MCP often is seen more as a read-only interface, right? But CLI is really empowering you to actually interact and build things within those systems that you're interfacing with as well.
Yeah.
And we do the same.
Opens up a lot, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah.
So let's finish on this question. We've been talking about MCP versus CLI, but is that even really the right question?
I don't think it's MCP versus CLI. I think it's MCP or CLI for whichever use case you're looking at, right? So if you're talking about interfacing with other enterprise ticketing systems or CRMs, etc., that's when you're more likely to see an MCP interface being the right approach for you. But if you're talking about using your personal co-pilot to work with you and actually help you get value out of whatever system you're interfacing with, that's when actually a CLI is going to be really, really valuable and probably more token efficient as well.
All right, maybe we should change the name of this video then.
Sorry.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, George.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure to have you on. Super, super interesting. And subscribe for future episodes and more interesting conversations with our lovely guests.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Bye.